Good morning and thank you for joining us for a live talk with EVONA, which is a specialist global recruiter for the space sector. It's good to see schools and individuals here with us today. During the talk, you will hear from Yasmin, Ross, Alice and Mike, and they will talk to you about the diversity of jobs within the space industry. Please feel free to ask any questions by putting if you put them in the chat, and our speakers will aim to answer as many as they can at the end of their talk. So that's enough from me. I'm going to hand you over to Yasmin. Good morning, Yasmin.
Hi, thanks for having us. Peter, if you could move to the next slide, please. So hi everyone, we are EVONA. We are a space sector recruitment company that is based in Bristol. Although we do have employees spread across the UK, we recruit mainly for companies in the United States, UK and Europe, although we do occasionally recruit for other countries across the world as well. The space sector covers a wide range of activities related to space exploration, satellite technology, research, human spaceflight and launch. The purpose of today's presentation is to hopefully show you how wide the space sector is and what the career possibilities are. Hopefully we can show you some options that maybe you didn't think of before. Next slide. We use the terms upstream and downstream to simply categorize parts of the space sector. So if we picture that we are building a satellite, what will be going into space, that is upstream activities and likely the early steps of building that satellite. It involves designing and making all the parts needed for the satellite. Upstream is all about getting everything ready before the satellite can launch. Myself and Mike will be covering upstream later on in this presentation. Downstream activities are usually later on in the process where the satellite is ready to do the job in which it was built to do and getting important information to use back here on Earth. Ross will be discussing downstream a bit later on, and Alice's market actually can cover either upstream or downstream. So on this slide here, there's a few different categories under what upstream and downstream are. Next slide, please. We are now going to move on to why the space sector is important. Contrary to popular belief, the space sector isn't all about exploring other planets. There are lots of different ways that we can incorporate space into our everyday lives, some of which might surprise you. Next slide, please. So as on this, what shows on this slide, there's lots of different reasons why the space sector is important. Firstly, the economic impact of space. So the space industry creates lots of jobs within the sector, drives economic growth and development and launch of satellites, as well as the provision of related products and services. It also leads to scientific research, so providing opportunities for scientific research in areas such as astronomy, physics and biology. This research leads to a better understanding of our universe and can also lead to practical benefits on Earth. We also have communication, so satellites are used for a variety of communication purposes, including TV, radio and internet. The space industry is responsible for launching and maintaining these satellites, which are essential for modern communication systems. We also have navigation, so GPS satellites either in your car or on your phone are critical for navigation, personal use, as well as like commercial use as well. So for example, if you need an ambulance, they can find you using satellites if you're unable to speak for any reason. So satellites can be used for that as well. And as well as national security, so used for military and intelligence purposes, including surveillance and space-based early warning systems. I also want to add that satellite data can help us monitor weather patterns and tracking in our environment, understanding things like hurricanes, earthquakes, and wildfires as well. And next slide, please. Here are just some like very specific ways that you probably didn't think of how satellites can influence our daily lives. Most of these have something to do with the internet or anything like that. Those are just things that we kind of take for granted every day. Next, please. So now we're going to discuss like the future of the space industry. So next slide, please. So when I started working in the space sector, I told my friends that I help people find jobs in the space industry, and their immediate response is that I recruit astronauts. When in reality, the number of astronauts in Europe compared to engineers is very vast. It's the number of astronauts is just a small figure compared to the amount of engineers working in the space sector. Next. Here are what some jobs could look like in the space sector. So the top left is a technician who's doing some sort of like cabling or soldering work. As you can see, he's wearing like gloves and a mask and a kind of boiler suit. And the reason for that is because satellite equipment is hugely expensive, and some of the components are so tiny and precise that even a strand of hair or a chipped nail could affect the whole thing. It could potentially not work if a piece of hair was lying on that piece of equipment. So that's why he is wearing that. The top right is an engineer who is working in like a control room, monitoring a satellite and potentially getting data from that satellite on those computers. And the middle picture is also an engineer, and the bottom left and right are people like us who work in things like recruitment, office jobs, sales, HR, etc., related to the space sector. Next, please. So if you are interested in one day having a career in the space sector, here are some subjects in school, college or university that are pretty good to study to get into the space sector. However, this is not an exhaustive list. There are several ways to enter the space sector, which we're going to be discussing later on. Next, please. So here are some non-school related skills that we look for when we're speaking to someone. So typically we would do like initial screening interviews for people. So we look at these kinds of skills as well. Companies will look for these sorts of skills that are transferable to getting jobs in the space sector eventually. So if you already have some of these soft skills, then you're already quite on your way. Next slide. Here are some further skills that are useful to have if you're interested in getting into either the tech side of space or the engineering side of space. This leads us on to discuss our own areas of expertise with EVONA, starting with Ross in tech.
Have the next slide, please. So yeah, as Yaz probably mentioned before, the usual traditional way into tech, and that is going to university and getting a computer science degree, but there is a lot of other routes in the space industry. Tech is probably quite a small part, but with the advancement in technology, cloud computing, it's actually becoming quite a major part, and there are a number of different ways to get in that you don't have to go to university, because look, I think everyone appreciates not everyone wants to go to university. So these are some of the sort of traditional different routes. So the military route, geospatial technology and satellites are huge within the military sector, to be able to communicate, to map where they're going, terrain, etc. And a lot of people that get into the industry, and even through tech, their transferable skills of using the technology, once they then leave the military, they can then go into the sectors where they're using that skill set. So that's one. Quite surprising one that when I first got in the sector, I didn't really realise a lot of people transfer from geography, which geography and tech, to me, I'd never seen a connection. But obviously it's using maps and understanding terrain. They then use the computer technology to build these maps on computers. What you see, say, on Snapchat, etc., or on Uber, that actually is someone that's coded those maps. So it's another way. A big one's website design. I'm sure some people do that. You don't necessarily have to have a degree to get into website design. There's a load of different courses. You can teach yourself website design, and I wouldn't say I'm an expert, but I've not got a degree, but I can do some coding. And with all the apps, like I keep bringing up Snapchat, Uber, the actual website side of it is getting quite big. There's testing, so you can again do courses within testing. That's actually helped build your knowledge up of software, and then you can then go into the more advanced stage of the development. A big one that I always see, and I'd probably say this is one of the biggest things in the space sector and in all the sectors, even if you haven't got a degree but you feel like you want to get into tech or the space industry, doing interns or apprenticeships or volunteering is huge. It shows that you've got a passion for the sector, and will go a long way for people wanting to hire you. There's a skill shortage everywhere, yeah, so people can't hire everyone with degrees. So if you show you've got an interest and that you've made the effort, that goes a long way. So that's probably one of the biggest things that I would recommend, along with joining coding groups. So I know that I walked past my local library the other day. It has a free coding session twice a week. So there's loads of places like that online, especially with things like ChatGPT, etc. There's so many different things that you can do. So I definitely recommend it on that one. And yeah, as I said there, tech is massive, and some of the biggest apps that you use on your phone are actually geospatial. The data's being sent from space. So it is a really, really good sector to get into. So if anyone is interested in it, I'd really recommend in researching it and going for it. Thank you.
Alice next.
Hello, I work in the sales, marketing and operations team at EVONA. Like the other guys have said, when most people think about the space sector, they usually think of astronauts, engineers and rocket scientists, but there are loads of equally important jobs behind the scenes that play a really huge part in the success of the space sector. Got a few examples here of some of the roles we recruit for and just some ideas to get into them. For example, if you're somebody who's more on the creative side, if you enjoy writing or storytelling, the space sector is always hiring for marketing experts and content creators to help get across the stuff that scientists and engineers do and turn them into exciting stories that everybody can enjoy. You don't need space experience for this, as long as you take an interest in the sector and are willing to learn about it. Creating your own portfolio or blog page is a really great way to showcase what you can do before you actually get work experience. We also recruit for a lot of sales roles. As you can imagine, doing things like building rockets and space stations costs a lot of money. So we need sales teams to win business and also talk to different companies and the government, convincing them to invest money in space projects. If you're a confident people person, if you're good at building relationships or sees themselves as a bit of an entrepreneur one day, then maybe that could be the route that you take. There's also a growing industry in selling services from satellites. This is for use by telecommunications companies, for example, who are buying bandwidth to send information all over the world via satellites. Some other really important roles are within law and finance. If you want to be a lawyer one day, did you know that you can be a space lawyer? And if you're good with numbers, we always need talented finance experts to make sure that the money is spent wisely and help get more when needed, so we can keep exploring space. Another option is a career in human resources. If you're somebody who enjoys working as a team or really organised and want to work with people and help them, this is another option to get into the space sector. They're the ones who make sure everyone's happy and that we have the right people in the right jobs, a bit like us. So that's everything from engineers and scientists to lawyers and salespeople. As you can see, it's important to note that to get a career in the space industry, you don't necessarily have to come from a technical background. There are loads of business-related, political, art-based careers available across the sector. For instance, any company which produces a product for use in the space sector requires a sales team, marketing staff, accountants, lawyers, and even graphic designers. The number of paths available to guide you into the space career are really vast. Just to give you a bit of an idea, behind every successful rocket launch is a team of people who without them it really wouldn't be possible. It may take a team of 10 people to launch a spaceship, but a team of 200 to ensure that those 10 have everything that they need. A good marketing team to ensure the brand is strong, a finance team to ensure the company has funding and capital to make the launch possible, a HR and talent team to look after the well-being of their staff and recruit top talent, legal teams to ensure full compliance within the company, and the list goes on. So all of these jobs play a really crucial part in ensuring that the rocket, for example, goes to space successfully. I think my advice would be the best place to start is working out what you enjoy, what your skills are, and how that translates into these sorts of roles. There are lots of different ways to get into these non-technical roles, whether that's a university degree, internships, online courses, getting a mentor who's already in space, networking, and just generally researching the space sector. Next slide, please.
Hi, my name's Mike. I head up a team at EVONA where we help electrical and electronics engineers find their next role in the space sector. So these engineers typically play a very important role in making sure that all the electrical systems on something like a spacecraft or a satellite work correctly. This can involve things like designing, building, testing, electronic systems that power and control these spacecraft or satellites. Just as sort of a general overview, in terms of electrical engineers, typically they will design and build the electrical systems that will sort of generate and distribute power to the different parts of the spacecraft. They make sure the spacecraft has enough electricity to run all the instruments and equipment. Once they're in space, typically the satellites will be sort of using solar power from the sun as they orbit the Earth. This would need to be collected and then stored in the onboard batteries, and then they would do the power distribution to ensure that all of these systems are working correctly. In terms of the actual electronic side, that's more of a focus around designing and building these actual electronic devices or hardware that would be used. Create things like sort of onboard computers, communication systems, sensors, which are pretty essential for collecting data, sending signals back to Earth, controlling the spacecraft. These need to be typically very sort of reliable. Obviously, there's very harsh conditions in space, so things like sort of extreme temperatures and radiation effects and that sort of thing. They will also sort of test and troubleshoot all of these sort of electronic systems, and are responsible to make sure that obviously they're functioning and providing the service that they need to. Next slide, please. So there is sort of various routes into a career within sort of electrical or electronics engineering. Obviously, you'd go to university to do a degree, but prior to that, you know, sort of typical routes after school would be sort of A levels at college. Common subjects you would see, yeah, things like computer science, mathematics, physics, general engineering. There are other routes into it as well, probably less common. There are sort of BTEC extended diplomas, which some universities will accept. Some universities also will provide sort of foundation programs or courses for people that don't have the traditional qualifications. Once at university, in terms of kind of the typical degrees, I mean, yeah, electrical engineering, electronics engineering, there's aerospace, there's sort of astronautics, even people who've done like physics or mathematics could transition into those types of roles. So that typically is sort of the path that people will take. Thank you.
Next slide, please. So this is my the market where myself and my team tend to recruit roles within. They sit in the upstream engineering category, which we were discussing before. So as you can see here, I work in the mechanical and systems team. So mechanical is how things like move and work, and structural is ensuring that everything is strong and stable, whereas thermal engineering is analysing how extreme temperatures, either extreme heat or extreme cool temperatures can affect parts of the spacecraft. So on the bottom left is what we call a thermal vacuum chamber, where the parts of the spacecraft go inside, and that's where it is tested vigorously with thermal and vibrations and acoustic testing to make sure that the spacecraft or components of the spacecraft can withstand that launch. We also have systems design and test. So systems engineers plan and manage different parts of a project to make sure everything works together smoothly. Design engineers is kind of like an artist using creative and technical knowledge to design the shape, size and features of that particular part. They also consider factors like safety and ease of use. Test engineers investigate and solve problems to make sure that everything is functioning as it should be. They find any problems or bugs and fix them before the spacecraft is launched. And then if we move on to like quality, so these are making sure that everything is going ahead smoothly and safely, making sure that everything works properly and all the equipment is strong enough to withstand the pressures of space. I've also listed here at the bottom some of the jobs that fall within my market that do not require a university degree. So technicians being the first ones. So those are like problem solvers. They fix machines and equipment. They use their knowledge to repair and maintain different types of machines and electronics. Operators then run the machines and make sure that they work. And make sure that the machines are producing the right things. And then the machinists create things from like metal and other materials using special machines like CNC to shape and cut the metal or other materials into specific shapes. And then with manufacturing, so manufacturing is like the process of making things at a large scale. It's the whole process from designing, creating and putting together all the different parts. And then production is all about making those things efficient and in large quantities as well. So if you would like to potentially get into any of the careers on this page, the typical things that people would do would be to get into mechanical engineering, a general aerospace engineering degree, or specific modules within engineering. So they do have thermal modules, quality modules, structural modules, and then with the non-university routes, everyone's already kind of mentioned it, apprenticeships and internships would be the routes to go. Large companies in particular, like Airbus in the UK, will be taking on a lot of these sorts of positions. Next slide, please. So does anyone have any questions for us?
Thank you very much, Team EVONA. That was really informative. So thank you very much for giving that talk today. We do have some questions in the chat, so I will hand you over to my colleague Peter, and he will put those to you.
How hard is it to get a job within the space industry? I'm not sure who would be the best person to answer.
I'll take it. Initially, it depends, like, kind of what route you go down, what university you go to, or how you kind of initially take the first step into the space sector. So I went to the University of West of England, and they have a massive aerospace program. So universities like that have a lot of careers fairs and stuff like that, where you can speak to companies themselves that would be hiring, looking to take on graduates, and just general careers fairs and stuff like that. Obviously, whilst you're in school, if you want to go down the apprenticeship route, there's lots of those on offer every single year. So I think if you decide that you would want to get into the space sector, if you do it from like university or apprenticeships when you're just a graduate, I think it's much easier to get into that way. Or alternatively, if you get into other areas of engineering like aircraft, automotive, medical, it's easily transitional into the space sector because there's a lot of similarities between those industries and space.
Thank you. And where in the country might you find a job in the space industry?
So everywhere is probably the answer there. There's probably a lot of companies that you don't think are space companies as well and are doing work, but I keep saying it, but a company like Uber is essentially their whole thing is run by satellite data, so they're a space company. But across the UK there are a lot of companies. I think in Cornwall alone, I seen a stat yesterday that there's 137 companies that are related to the space industry. So that just gives you a sort of number, but yeah, there's more than you think.
I would just add on to that. There's a massive space park in Harwell in Oxford that have about 100 different types of space companies in the UK. We also do a lot of relocators. So if there's ever interest of going to another country, it's very, very common to move to a different country to pursue a career in space.
Brilliant. And that's the next question is, how hard is it to get with a job within the space industry? So
I can take that. It isn't particularly hard. I think, like Yasmin sort of mentioned earlier, there are a lot of transferable skills, and the space sector is growing at such a rate where typically they don't have to just look for people that have worked within the space sector. They're looking at people that come from industries that have got transferable skills where they can transition into it. And yeah, the growth of the space sector in the UK alone is so huge at the moment. There typically isn't enough space engineers to fill all the positions, which is why it's really important to try and get people to sort of pursue a career in space, but also to help transition people from other industries. And that's kind of why we come in and sort of help to educate clients around that.
I just say we work in the space sector as well. So it's not always the obvious companies like you keep saying, like SpaceX, and I've got no skills in the space sector, so.
Yeah, it's amazing where you can work with certain skills. Yeah, and talking about skills, somebody's asked, is there any jobs in chemistry in the space sector? I believe Helen Sherman was a chemist, wasn't she?
There is. They are typically called like materials and process engineers, but that are basically chemists within the space sector. So that is like a very kind of specific type of job, but they definitely exist, and all companies would hire that sort of engineer.
And there are companies that are looking to do like laboratory tests in space, because apparently there's certain benefits of doing things in space. So yeah, in the future, you never know what sort of jobs could be in this space.
I think also, just to add on as well, there's things like chemists that are involved in the sort of propellants that are used for spacecraft. So designing and testing fuels that use on sort of rocket engines, and also sort of studying chemistry of sort of planets and asteroids, analysing samples, and yeah, the use of that as well.
Brilliant. And somebody's actually turned the question around the other way. If someone left the space industry, what skills would they have gained to use elsewhere? I think Ross has covered that a little bit with other industries that he said it's available, but who else would like to answer?
Yeah, happy to jump in. So I think also, you know, when you're working within the space sector, you know, you're working to very high sort of safety critical environment, high integrity industry, and that's easily applicable to other industries like wider aerospace, sort of automotive, even things like medical devices, where the safety critical element is so important. So depending upon the skill set, there is a lot of other industries that you could sort of transition to.
That's quite a nice question. What's the toughest part about working in this sector?
I'd say the barriers to entry at first initially are quite hard, yeah, but it is improving, and going through and finding the companies to work for probably are probably the toughest things, I'd say, if anyone else wants to add.
Yep, thank you. And we've actually got a question, is what is an astrophysicist? Who would like to answer that one?
Come on, don't be shy.
I'm not an expert in astrophysics, but it's people that work with the universe and sort of scale stars and planets. So yeah, not an expert, but it's study of sort of stars and planets.
And we're sure that people could give it a good old Google if they needed to.
Yeah, it's interesting because you do find astrophysicists in the space industry, and lots of different engineering companies use astrophysicists because of their strength in physics and maths as well. Right. So it's quite interesting. Quite a lot of questions about launching rockets now.
We do work with a lot of companies that launch rockets, so feel free to ask those.
Okay. When the rocket is constructed, how is it moved to the launch pad?
It is moved to the launch pad on something called like ground support equipment. So it's basically a huge structure on wheels that they would move any part of the spacecraft.
If anyone is excited, you can look at them on YouTube, like moving out and things like that. They don't go very fast, though, is what I would say. They move like incredibly slow. And I know some get like put together in, say, like Cape Canaveral, for example, where you'll see a lot of the rockets go for, and then move from the hangar, and it can take days, or they're built somewhere and then transferred by road and then assembled there as well. But yeah, there's loads of YouTube videos of watching it, and yeah, as you can probably see, I have.
The part of it that holds it like still is the rocket test stand, if that was the question as well. So it's transported by ground support equipment, and then the thing that holds it while it's getting ready to launch would be the rocket stand.
I think that question's now inspired somebody to ask is, how is a rocket constructed?
So it would take probably quite a few years to put together a rocket. So a lot of the projects that we work with and clients that we work with, these projects are very long lasting projects. It's not going to be put up in a day or a week or even a year. So it will be all of the components and the systems stuff that's done first, the really complicated parts of a spacecraft, and the structure would then go last, and then it would be tested, and the quality assurance team would be taking a look at it the whole time and doing the final checks. So it probably would be, I would say, about 5 years for a rocket to be constructed, unless they'd done that same rocket previously before.
There's a lot of launches and tests on rockets you don't even see, and they're actually kind of, first of all, they design them to actually blow up, or they know they're going to blow up or have accidents, and that data that they collect is actually helps them design it sort of further. So I don't know if anyone's seen the massive Starship rocket that SpaceX launched that blew up after launch. That was kind of expected, and there's sort of a saying that failed launches are actually beneficial. And
then getting back to career questions, is what is the most common or popular way people come into the space industry?
At the moment, I would say it's still the degree route, a general aerospace degree, or if you know right off the bat what kind of engineering degree you want to do, then that is still the most common way. And then after that, it would be working with a larger company, because they have a lot more graduate schemes and entry level requirements, whereas a startup will probably only have like 1 or 2, potentially 3 or 4 a year, whereas the large corporations would have probably about 100 a year.
The military is a good one as well, because you can really get some hands-on experience and then potentially get your training, your degrees paid for. So I'd also say the military.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. Thank you very much. We have got a question, unfortunately, on salaries. What sort of range of salaries could you earn in the space industry?
Because the jobs that we do are so wide, it really, really does depend. And because we also recruit for lots of different countries worldwide, it does depend. I would say it's a very lucrative industry to get into, though.
Okay, thank you. Then I'll finish with this last question. It's about your company name. How was the name EVONA created?
So that was on the first slide, I think. So we are broken up into EVONA, which is to evolve, and ONA, which means people. I think it's Latin, but I'm not 100% sure. But I think, yeah, we kind of came together to put that name from the broken up prefix and suffix.
Thank you, Yasmin. I'll hand you back to Lisa now.
Yeah, thank you very much. Actually, I'm going to throw a question in there. Do you have many females applying for roles within the space industry, or is it generally males?
That is a very good question, and one that we are continuously addressing. It has got a lot better, but there is still an inequality of the male and female split within the space sector. It is more prominent in certain areas than others as well. I think Alice might want to say something on that.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, I think it really depends on the market. Like Yas says, it is getting a lot better. I think particularly in engineering and tech, there's definitely a more male heavy market. So we do really try and get more females into the sector. For the market I do, interestingly, since I've joined EVONA, I've actually placed more females than I have males. But it really does depend on the type of role. But we have seen a lot of companies really trying to encourage diversity and get more females involved. So I think it starts from you guys at education and getting into that. I think when me and Yaz were at school, it probably wasn't as encouraged to get into engineering for girls, but now it is getting a lot better. I think the next generation, it is going to be a much more equal split.
There's a lot of things out there within the space sector, and we can send over some people to maybe follow and connect with that are doing some great things to encourage diversity, and especially females within the industry. And I think it's probably one of our biggest things as a business, not just trying to place people in the space industry, but actually trying to grow that industry, make it more diverse, make it more exciting. So yeah, all I'd say is if you are a female looking to get into the space industry, it's highly recommended. And yeah, there is an openness to change industry, which is really, really good.
Oh, thank you very much. That's a good note to end up on. I'd just like to thank all of you today. It was a really great, interesting talk, and we're sure our audience is inspired and more aware of what types of roles are available within the space industry. And we'll share various links with everyone post-event. So thank you for joining us today. Have a good day. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.